Okay, so Chapter 8 of the Leadership textbook focuses on leadership and organizations. So the first subcategory of the chapter is elements of organizational culture. The first thing I got out of that was a good way to determine how an organization views itself and the world is by listening carefully to the language that organizational members use. Next, it also says that organizational stories carry multiple messages. They reflect important values, inspire, and describe what members should do and provide a means to vent emotions. Then also, it goes on to talk about rituals, rites, and routines involved repeated patterns of behavior. And these rites include rites of passage, degradation, enhancement, renewal, conflict reduction, integration, creation, transition, and parting. So the next thing that the chapter rolls into is the concept of shaping culture. And it first talks about the primary mechanisms of what it means to shape culture. And the first one is attention. The next one is reactions to critical incidents. Third is resource allocation. And then there's also role modeling, rewards, and then selections. So those are pretty much the main things that you look for when shaping a culture. But then other things that kind of factor in too, otherwise known as the secondary mechanisms, were the structure, the systems and procedures, the rites and rituals, physical space, stories, and then also just kind of formal statements in general. So moving on in the chapter, the next subcategory is creating a learning and trusting culture. So the first thing you do is you look for search intelligence. So search intelligence involves scanning and analyzing data that already exist or are readily available through public sources. Next, you have inquiry intelligence, and that's kind of something that must be used when existing information is incomplete or unavailable. And then next we have observation intelligence, which that's kind of self-explanatory. So it pretty much is appropriate when respondents have trouble communicating their real needs or feelings. So you just kind of have to grasp that just based off true observations. And the next is experience learning, and that's based on doing such as entering a new overseas market or requiring a competitor. And then finally, there's experimentation that comes into play when organizations enter unfamiliar territory and learners introduce change, but then also observe and draw conclusions. So those are the ones that I kind of felt were most important out of the list of them. The next ones kind of included business context, organizational structure and roles, organizational processes, organizational climate, physical environment, direction, measurement, means, and then ability and motivation. So the chapter then moves on into the leader as a strategist. So to be a strategist, you have to anticipate, you have to challenge, you have to interpret, you have to decide, you have to align, and then you also have to learn. And the thing that it talks about as being a strategist is the 5 forces tool, which the 5 forces tool includes number 1, supplier power, number 2, buyer power, 3, competitive rivalry, 4, the threat of substitution, and then wrapping it up is threat of new entry. The chapter then moves on to the leader as a sense maker, which the main thing that came from this was framing, which framing is pretty much creating a mental picture of the world and then encouraging followers to accept this frame or interpretation in one important sense-making tool. And the next was the Pygmalion effect. And this one I kind of felt more interesting than the rest. I've talked about this in other communication courses before, so it was kind of cool to see what this textbook thought about it and how it applies. So what it says on that is expectations shape motivation and performance. The Pygmalion effect refers to our tendency to live up to the expectation of others. Generally, the higher expectancy, the higher performance. Leaders communicate expectations through climate, input, output, and feedback. And then also it states that to create a high expectation or a high performance cycle, you eliminate labels, assign new employees to effective managers, and use guided mastery to build skill levels. So that's pretty much what I've learned when it comes to the Pygmalion effect. But it was kind of cool to see how it applies to leadership roles and like kind of entrepreneurship in general. So yeah, that's pretty much chapter 8 in a nutshell.